Hello and welcome to SoftPeak, the place where we work smarter to save more time to do other things. And today we're going to focus on data and how we can be more effective and work smarter with data. So if we jump over here to my Microsoft 365 tenant, we can see we have a bunch of applications already available to me in this standard business setup license I have. I think the most commonly used application when we think about data is probably Excel, Microsoft Excel. And I can see here I have the possibility to create a new blank workbook, and I can use even templates to work with certain types of data. But if I open up a new blank worksheet like this, it will be stored inside my OneDrive account. So from here I can use the web to create certain things. So maybe I can do it manually, like a ABC, for example. I can just type stuff in here, or I can open it up inside my desktop experience. So it will open up here in my desktop experience. Inside here I can do a bunch of interesting things. I can go into this data tab that we have right here. So if we click on this data tab, like that, we have this option of getting data. So we can get data from other places that we don't have to manually type in ourselves. So for example, we can get it from various files, and we can format the files from the files to the needed format that we want to have inside Excel. We can also use from various data sources, databases that we can have, or even from Azure services, or even from something called the Dataverse inside the Power Platform. And we can also get data from the web. And we can also use this specific thing here, this little block here with data types. I think this one is really interesting, where we can have various data types. For example, we can have geography. So for example, if I have a couple of countries here, we call it Sweden, and we have Denmark, and we have the USA, and we have China, for example. If I highlight this, I can see that I can convert this into geography. We see that now we have a little icon on the left-hand side here. We can see that we have intelligence inside here. We can see who is the king of Sweden, and we can also see currency and lots of other things as well. So if I just expand this a little bit, we have this little insert data right next to it, and we can see here, for example, we can have the area that it's supporting, and we can also add other stuff as well. So we can have, for example, currency code, for example, so we can see that we're using the kronas here. And we can also use this if for example, if I add this into a table like this, I will just add it to a table, and we call this one not like that, so we will have to call it country, like that. If I now add additional columns here, for example, if I go back to create this area, so I can replace it, it will figure out for all of them. And I can also add maybe more things like this, maybe the capital. So maybe I want to see what is the main city of this. Now when I have this really nice table here, I can highlight this table, and I can go into the Insert tab, and I can look at recommended charts, for example. I can visualize the data I have here into really interesting charts. For example, I want to use this mapping chart, for example. It gives me a really interesting picture on how the various areas of the countries are situated. I can also use this kind of feature down here. If I highlight this area here and I click this one, I can use maybe the data bars to indicate the size for this. So maybe I use the data bars to be able to see how they compare to each other. And now I can also add other countries. Maybe Canada is one that I would like to be interested in. I can also figure out, it's the capital of Canada is this one. And I can click on this one and get more intelligence from this one. For example, here in Stockholm, we can see a bunch of different data from the city of Stockholm as well. What I also can do, let's say I want to add a new tab down here. What I also can do is I can hit this this data tab again, and I can get data. I can get data from for example, from the web, from the internet. So let's say I go to the this one and select, I get the option of adding data, adding a URL from the data. So let's say I want to go somewhere on the internet and I want to add maybe the TOB index of the most popular programming languages out there. So this is July 2023. So we have a nice table here, and I want to look at this table within Excel, because I think Excel is maybe an even bigger programming language than Python and C and C# and Java, because it's more users using Excel, and it's also Turing complete. So it's a proper programming language. But I also think that maybe the absolutely most used programming language today is probably the language English, because everyone is talking English to the AI to create applications for them. So if I want to have this TOB index, I can of course copy this, I put this into memory, and I can go back to my here and I can type in the paste in rather than this address into this. It will figure out, it's connected to the website and I want to connect it to the TOB website. And I can see here we have a couple of options here, tables. I can click on this one, and now I can see I have the data from the table immediately in here. I can just press load, or I can click on this transform. If I click on load, it will just load the data in, like similar to this. If I click on the transform before I do the load, we see this Power Query Editor, which is a really powerful tool inside Microsoft Excel that can help me transform the data. That's typically what I want to do. I want to transform the data, and I can also have some applied steps. Let's say I want to put this on an automation. I want to do this every now and then. I want to update this data on a schedule. I can do this, and I can use the Power Query Editor to do the transformations, the steps that I want to take. And maybe I want to join a couple of tables, and I want to merge something or add something. Whatever I want to do, I can do it inside this kind of neat tool. And then I can click this close and load. I can get the data from the website directly in here. If I now click on the Home tab again here, I have this really nice feature built into Excel called Analyze Data. It can use some AI features that we can use to be able to analyze the data within this table, because it's already formatted into a table. I can click this Analyze Data. We get a couple of interesting sections here. I can ask about the data I just see. I can even add interesting charts that the AI thinks it's relevant for this. So maybe I can insert this chart here, and I can see what type of anomalies I might have in the data. I can work with the data. I can better understand the data. So switching over back to this old one again, maybe I can see that Denmark is smaller in area than Sweden, but that's not really true, because in some data sets, Denmark is also including Greenland. So then it becomes bigger. So you need to be mindful on what the quality of the data that you have. So same thing here. For example, what the amount of programming languages we have here might be different depending on how the data is kind of like scoped. We can also see here on this position here, we can see that we have a SQL, which is a dedicated kind of scripting programming language that we can use to work directly with the data using the structured query language. And inside my subscription here in Microsoft 365, I can use an application called Access. So let's try and find it here. And we can use the Access application, which is a really small kind of database that we can use to be able to create our own little database file. So it can showcase a little bit of example of how we can use the SQL programming language. So if I click this blank database, it will create a blank database file for me. It will be stored inside my documents, and that's all fine. I won't name the database anything specific, so I will just add it like that. Now I have the option of adding a couple of tables to my database. So let's say I want to add something here. I want to just type in something here, a name maybe, like that. And I want to have the field called name, and I want to have it like that. And I want to have the customer name. And let's say I want to sell something to Microsoft, like that. That's my customer name. Then I can kind of close this one, and I will just save it, and I will call it customer. So now I have a table called customer. Inside this customer table, I just have an ID number 1, and I have a customer name Microsoft. So inside here I can see what type of structure I have. I have a field name called ID and name, and I have a data type of short name. There's tons of different data types that I can work with depending on the database I'm using. So now I also want to have a new one. So we create a new one, and I can use this table designer, and I want to create a name called ID. This is the primary key, as typically call it inside the relationship database. So I want to use this maybe as a auto number. I just wanted to have it automatically number, and I will call this product. Just a product, and it should be short text because it should be a name of a product. If I now try and close this, it will ask me to save it, and I call this product, like that. So now I see I have a customer and a product, and now I want to have a third table. So I do this again. I create a third table here, and I call it, do the same thing. We do it ID, just a primary key. So we have something unique inside this table, and we call it customer. And this should be a lookup to this table here, the customer table. So I will do this. I will arrange this as a lookup wizard. So I will attach it to the other table. I want this to be connected to the table of customer. So I will just do this, and I will use the ID as the identifier for this. So I will just add something here, and just this is good, and I just press next, and I call it finished. So we set it now, and we call this one deals. So this is the deals that we want to have. Inside here, I also want to map this to a product. So let's do it like product, like that. And we also add this as a lookup to the product, like this. So I will map this to the product, and I will use the same ID for this as well. So let's do it like this, and I just press next and finished. So we call it like that. Now we have 3 different tables here. So we can also now add a couple of deals, but first let's add a product. So we will add a product, and we'll call it M365, just a product like that. We can also add maybe a number here, but let's call it price. So we have an understanding, and the price maybe should be for M365, maybe it's I don't know, $12, maybe something like that. And now we can have a look. We have in the customers tables, we have just one customer, and we have in the products table, we just have one product. So inside the deals, we will now match this one with the other. So I picked the customer number 1, and I picked the product number 1 as well. So now we have our first kind of deal. And here is where SQL comes really handy. If I create something here, maybe I want to create a report, or maybe I want to create a form or something like that. But I can also create a query. So the query, I will just use a simple query just to showcase this. So what I want to do is that I want to pick up from the deals table. I want to pick up the customer and the product. I will pick them all just to show this, and I will press next. So we call it a deals query. So this query is showing me each deal I have. So it's basically similar as this one, same type of information. But right now in this query, I can right click this, and I can show the design view. Now I can see what I have here. I can also check this SQL view. We can see a select from the various tables and from the deals table. So it picks up the various columns from the deals table. That's all really good. If I now go back to this designer, I can then add and show tables here. So I can show the various other tables that I have. So maybe I want to add both of the customer and product. I will add those two. Now we can see the relationship between those two. Now we can see that the customer has a relationship to the customer, and a product has a relationship to the product table. Now I can add in the product name. I can just drag them like that, and I can do it exactly like this. Now, if I view this one, if I go back to the data view for this, now I also see the name. It's picking up the name for this. If I now show the SQL view, the SQL view, now we see it's a bit more complex. It's adding an inner join to this as well. This is, of course, a really basic scenario, and this can be extended. And typically, you don't use this kind of flat file kind of databases so much. You typically use a server-side database like a Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle databases or something like that, or MySQL, or depending on your programming language you use, there's typically a good database match to that. And there's different types of database. Not all databases is a relational database either, but it's a pretty basic understanding on how you can do this. So what we also can do is we can click on this external data tab here as well. We can see that there is a couple of other things here. I can also add from various sources here. I can add from similar as the other one. I can add, for example, from a SharePoint list. So SharePoint list is also a kind of a SQL server as well inside the Microsoft SharePoint. So what we can do here is we can, for example, we can create a SharePoint list directly from here. Let's say I want to maybe create a contact list or a task list or an events list maybe, or I want to add it from an already existing list. So I can go to my maybe to any SharePoint site. Let's take this SharePoint site. This is the default one, the home site of this. I can, of course, click on this here and contents, and I can add from my site contents. I can add from here, I can add a list, and I can see that I already have a couple of lists. So the lists is already in here. I have an events list, for example, and I can use these lists in order to access certain things. So let's click this event list, and I can add this, I can copy this event list, and I go back into here, and I can create, and I can use this SharePoint list from an existing SharePoint list. I can just type in this list, and it can link the data, or it can import the data from this list. So maybe I want to link it, so I want the SharePoint list to be the master in this case. I just press next, and I can choose which type of list I want to add from here. And I wanted to have the events list, maybe. I don't think we have any data in the events list yet, but we can add this. Now we see that I managed to pick two. I can see inside the events list, I see lots of different things. So all of the columns here is coming directly from within SharePoint. So I can go back into here, and I can, of course, add events directly here. Or I can go back to my starting page like this, and I can add an events here. Maybe I want to have just below here, I want to add the event. So there's actually a web part called events. So I can add this here, and I can have various views to this as well. I can have it as a film strip, or I can have it more compact. So maybe I can have upcoming events like this. So we just republish this. Now this, I can create an event from inside here. So let's call it M365 Happy Days, for example. And I will have it, maybe I will have it on, let's say, Monday. I will have it as I have left all day. And I can add more information to this. If I now click on save, this event has been stored, so I can see it on my starting page here, and I can also see it. It will eventually come here to the starting page, and I can click here to see it. If I click on the site contents and I go back into the events list, I can see I have an item in here, and I can open it up, and I can see in the various views, I can see that we have various events inside here. So maybe I will change the view and see if I can find another view here that works. Maybe this was a bad example to take specifically this one, but let's change the view to all events view, and we can see we have this happy days. If I now go back into access here, and I can click on this one, and I can do a refresh of this. So if I click on the more options here, I can do a refresh list. It will refresh all of the lists I have. I can open up the events list. Now I see my happy days inside here as well. So going back to my home site now, we can see on the starting page of my home site, I can see my happy days, and I can of course click on it, and I can add more stuff to this as well. So this way I can reuse data from many different places. So working with this kind of basic data, we can also upscale this into more advanced features or more supportive features that have tons of more features in it. One of them being Microsoft Power BI. So if I go into my applications here, I can see that I don't have Power BI here yet inside my suite of applications. So I will add this just by going to to Power BI like that. I can see that I can start a free session here with Power BI. I can just try for free. It will sign me up into app and I need to ask later. I only have one more day. So inside here now it will open up and it will sign me in and it will create a Power BI for me. So I would just press continue here. I will create a new Power BI account. So maybe I want to say that I'm actually in I'm not here, I'm in, let's see if I can find my country here, Sweden, and I need to sign in with an account. So I will do that. So now I created a Power BI account, signed up to Power BI. Now I can enter Power BI. It's preparing, it's making some changes to my environment, meaning my tenant. So it will add a couple of things to my tenant here. So I will pause it just briefly. So now when it's done, it's kind of magic. I see this new kind of Power BI home screen. So now it's in app powerbi.com. I can explore the basic concepts of Power BI, and BI stands for business intelligence. So it's about adding the data into more an intelligent kind of view. So I can see a couple of productivity tips, for example, that can be interesting. And I can explore the data story, like having like maps and clickable and interactive pieces, or I can just have this introduction on what Power BI is all about. But before we kind of start this one off, I will also hit this little download button up here. So if I click this download button, there is something called Power BI Desktop. So if I click this one and I say open, it will open up the Microsoft Store and it will figure out where in the store the Power BI application is. And then I can click the Get Power BI Desktop. It will install the Power BI Desktop tooling on my local computer. So opening up the Power BI Desktop directly from the store, I can see that we have a couple of getting started things as well. I think the main reason to have the Power BI Desktop is that you can work with the data locally and it becomes a bit more faster. Even though this application might consume tons of resources on your computer, it's still a very good way to work with data. So if we start off here by clicking on the Get Data, we can see on the Get Data tab here, we can see that we have tons of connectors or ways of getting data, much more than we had inside Microsoft SQL. So we can add data from many, many different places inside here. It's tons of different places where I can get my data, including Microsoft Access and Excel and of course SharePoint as well. So going back to the start screen of Power BI Desktop, we can see in this section here, in the middle here, we can see that it suggests you to sign in. And that means up in the top corner here, sign in to this. But we can hit this Get Started kind of button and we need to fill in some information. So now I signed in here with my Microsoft 365 account to this Power BI Desktop. I have a couple of options of how I want to add data. I think the most popular one is probably Excel, but I can also try a sample data set just for this scenario. I can take a short tutorial here, experiment on my own, so I can load sample data from a data set already available with some financial things. I can see that this is an Excel sheet by the naming, and I can look at the financials. I can see we have a couple of tables here, and I can look at the sheet as well. But let's take just the financials. I have the same thing as I had in Excel that I can use to transform data. I see the same Power Query editor, and I have this kind of language here where I can type in various things, and I have this applied step. So in a similar way as we had Power Query inside Excel, and we have the same functionality within Power BI, so we can automate this and we can do this kind of fetching data and manipulating data and arranging data, merging data, etc. inside the applied steps here directly. So if I click this apply and close, it will load it into the Power BI. So I have this now inside my Power BI. I have this on the left-hand side. We have 3 different views. We have a report view, we have a data view, and we have a model view. If I click this report view that I'm in right now, we see that I have tons of visualizations. I can visualize my data. So I can see on the right-hand side, I can use this, for example, if I want to show sales, I can show the sales from the Excel sheet, and I can use various graphics like that to be able to visualize my data. In the data view, I can see the data in a similar way as we did in Excel. I can see the data structure, and if I have like relationships like we did in Microsoft Access, if we have relationships with multiple different tables that we want to merge together to create new kind of queries, we can do that also inside Power BI. When I'm working with this is all good. I work locally with this, and I create my data, arrange my data, and I create my reports like that. And I want to maybe add something here. I want to add a couple of tables just to showcase something like this. I want to create a really fancy kind of dashboard. And of course, there's tons of resources out there to be able to go deeper than this brief overview. So you can really dive deep into the data and the Power BI especially, because there's tons of things there. But I think a couple of interesting kind of pointers in Power BI is to work with the data and relationships, but also use the measure and this kind of DAX query language that you can use to manipulate data. It's a really good way of kind of merging and putting the data together and visualize it. If I then want to publish it, it says publish this report online using the Power BI service. So there's 2 sides to this. One is the Power BI desktop. The other one is the online versions, the Power BI service in the cloud. So in the cloud, there is a bunch of possibilities to be able to collaborate and share and to work with data across the entire organization using various workspaces. So you can have the various users accessing certain workspaces, and you also have the concept of my workspace, like your personal workspace, similar to the OneDrive experience. So we can publish things to my workspace if I want to have it on the Go experience, for example. And we can explore the basic concepts around Power BI. By looking at this, we can see that we can get data, create visualizations and reports, and then publish it and analyze it for decision making, to make more intelligent decisions around your business data. So this is typically how this works. And we can have a look at this and see a data set, so we can explore the 100 most useful productivity tips. So for example, we can see this is a typical example on how a Power BI dashboard might look. So for example, we can see time boxing, prioritize, say no. And this is really good because we can publish this, and we can also publish this into a SharePoint site, for example, the intranet site or something like that. We can publish this report using the Power BI web part. A really good thing with this kind of Power BI dashboard reports is it's interactive. I can select various scopes, and I can click on the various buttons, and I can get more intelligent kind of scoping and features. So going back, maybe we can have another example here, explore this data story. And we can see the cancer analytics dashboard. I can click on various areas on this little map, and I can see the data is changing. And that way we can kind of data mine our business intelligence and figure out what type of data makes sense and what's to dig out the really golden nuggets inside the data, because data is probably one of the most important things for most businesses today, to have proper data and have really good understanding of data. So Power BI is a really good tool for this. So there's also the concept of the Dataverse, which is something that's inside Microsoft 365 or in the Power Platform concept. We can see it inside Power BI desktop here. We have the Dataverse. We can click on this and see that we don't have any tables or anything in the Dataverse. If I go back to my admin center and I can hit this, hitting the waffle here and the admin center, I can go in here and I can click on show more, and I show all of the admin centers, and I can click this Power Apps, use the Power Platform admin center, so we can go into the Power Platform admin center, admin Power Platform Microsoft.com. We can see that inside here we have a couple of concepts. We have one concept being environments and another one being data, and to work with data and integrate with data. So this each environment like this, I only have one environment. I can create a new environment from here, and in this environment I can add a Dataverse, a data store into this environment, or I can click in on an existing environment like this, and I can add a Dataverse to this environment. When I do this, I can select what type of language I would like to have, and I can add a Dataverse to this experience. So it's really preparing here. This takes a couple of minutes, so now it's finished loaded. We have the Dataverse. It says yes on my default environment. That's all good. I can go back now to my Power BI desktop, and I can click this Dataverse. Now I should be able to see that we have a Dataverse in here. If I expand this, we should be able to see lots of different tables inside here. So it's creating a bunch of tables out of the box when I just created the database. And that's for the common data model, because it's using a standardized model of commonly used kind of tables and structures that should be the same across multiple different vendors. So we should be able to have a defined way of how we kind of what type of columns we have for an email, for example, or for a person, or for a contact, or similar things. Most of the data in Dataverse will be, of course, be empty when we start it off. But the idea is that we can use this data using Power Apps and create model-driven applications. So we can create forms and applications in a similar way that we can do in Access, but in the cloud. So we can create proper applications based on the model of the data we have. So with that, I think I will conclude this session for today. And in a future session, we will take a deep dive into the Dataverses and the Power Platform and the Power Apps and Power Automate, and how we can integrate it all together in a really, really good way as well. So with that, I thank you so much for watching today's sessions about data. And this is a series of YouTube videos that we call SoftPeak, with the intent of working smarter to have more time to do the things that really matters to us, and increase our digital literacy and have more dexterity around how we work with the digital tooling, and leverage the power of artificial intelligence, and also democratize the way that we work with the tooling. So if you really like this kind of content, then hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. But you can also hit this newsletter section here up in the SoftPeak and sign up to a coming newsletter. So with that, thank you so much for watching today, and have a good one.